I received her letter on the very day the funeral ended. Everyone was busy arguing over who would get the antique set, who would take the diamond necklace she used to wear every Thanksgiving. No one noticed me, quietly slipping into the car, opening the dark cream envelope with the familiar shaky handwriting. Don't let them see you have anything, Mia. People's true nature only shows when they think you've got nothing left to lose. She wrote. I thought her final words would be full of love and tears like in the movies. But no. Instead, they were a survival lesson. And a $36 million financial empire. When my grandmother, Margaret Whitmore, passed away at 87, everyone in the family remembered her as the eccentric old lady living in a wooden house in Vermont. With her hand-knitted sweaters, worn-out slippers, and afternoon tea always with exactly 3 sugar cubes, she never showed any sign that she had once been the most powerful woman in Massachusetts real estate investment. Even my mother, Karen Whitmore Hayes, only saw her as a grumpy, stubborn, and ridiculously stingy old woman. She never gave us a dime when my mom got divorced, never paid for my college tuition, never sent expensive gifts during the holidays. She only gave books, and every time I got excited, my mom would glare at me and say, Mia, you don't need more fairy tale nonsense. But that envelope wasn't a fairy tale. It came with a thick stack of documents from a law firm I had never heard of, confirming that I was the sole heir of Margaret. Not my mother, not my stepfather Rick, not even my brother, Logan, the tech genius who failed startup after startup, but still got praised by Mom as the one who'll save this family. Me, a 25-year-old bookstore manager at a tiny independent shop called Maple Pages, earning $2,400 a month, now owned 12 properties spanning 3 states, from Boston to Seattle, controlling shares in 3 investment companies. A diversified investment portfolio worth $36 million, steadily growing for over a decade. And attached to the will was a nearly 2-page handwritten letter she had written to me before passing. Mia, if you're reading this, I'm already gone. But don't cry. I don't need tears. I need you to be stronger and smarter than anyone in this family. Don't let them know what you have. Don't tell your mother, Logan, or anyone. They won't see you as family anymore, just a walking safe. I sat frozen in the car for almost an hour after reading it. In my head echoed my mother's complaint from yesterday. Your grandmother left us nothing but a bunch of musty old books and broke people's ideals. I almost laughed. That musty smell could now buy her entire neighborhood twice. But I didn't say a word. I didn't argue. I didn't flaunt. I chose silence. From that day on, I started living a double life. I still worked at Maple Pages, still made coffee every morning, restocked shelves, answered questions about Murakami books. I still lived in the tiny apartment upstairs. And no one knew I owned the entire building plus the 3 houses next door. I let everyone believe I was still struggling. Still poor Mia. My mother pitied me even more. Sweet Mia's too kind but doesn't have a clue about life, she'd tell the neighbors every time I visited. They thought I was weak, naive, poor, and easy to manipulate. I let them think that. Every time Logan posted pictures of his vacation in Cabo with the caption, "A fresh start for my next startup," I quietly smiled. One of the investment accounts I'd just reviewed the monthly budget for had acquired a small tech company, the very one he didn't know had gone bankrupt 6 months ago. Every time my mom called to complain about gas prices, electricity bills, and then vaguely hinted, "Mia, have you saved a bit? I want to buy Logan a new laptop so he can start again." I reminded myself, not yet. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for the right moment. Because as my grandmother once said, true power isn't about how much money you have. It's about when you choose to let others know you have it. On Monday morning, I made myself a latte with Maple Pages' squeaky old coffee machine, poured it into a chipped ceramic mug, and walked back to the front counter. The electricity bill was barely clipped to the notice board, faded from the sunlight streaming through the dusty window. I stood there, holding the inventory notebook, pretending to be lost in numbers. Just your typical bookstore manager juggling to keep her beloved but fragile job afloat. No one knew that right above this old bookstore was my apartment, redesigned into a discreet meeting room, where I had once signed a $2,300,000 contract to acquire a commercial property in downtown Boston. No one knew that the same computer I used to check inventory was also where I monitored the global investment portfolios of Carter Holdings, one of the shell companies I set up under the name Margaret Legacy Trust. A name old-fashioned enough to raise no suspicion. And of course no one suspected that I was the CEO, the one with full control over more than $25 million in actively managed assets each day. "Mia's sweet but foolish," my mother would say every time I declined an invitation to family gatherings, where all eyes would inevitably be on Logan, the 22-year-old genius little brother who still couldn't land a stable job. Logan had failed 2 rounds of fundraising, burned through over $300,000 of Mom's investment, yet she still praised him like he was the reincarnation of Steve Jobs. "Logan just needs a little more time," she'd say. "He has vision. He's not like the rest." And me? I graduated with honors in economics from Tufts University. I paid for all of it through scholarships and juggling 3 part-time jobs every semester. But no one in the family remembers that. All they see is that I work at a bookstore and drive an old 2009 Ford Focus. Once at a party celebrating Logan's fresh new startup, his 3rd attempt really, my mom pulled me aside, giving me a disappointed once-over. "Mia, you should at least wear a little makeup. Serena, Aunt Linda's daughter, she's just a secretary but dresses like a CEO." I just smirked, thinking back to that very morning when I'd approved the acquisition of our 8th commercial building in Chicago's financial district. I didn't need to dress like a CEO. I was the CEO. Sometimes I wondered if they were truly blind, or if they were just deliberately choosing not to see me. As if I were a shadow in the grand story they believed Logan was the main character of. One Friday afternoon my mom called, her voice unusually cheerful. "Mia, this weekend Logan's presenting a new idea for a pet connection app. We're throwing a little party. I've invited a few influential people in tech. Make sure you dress nicely, okay?" I pressed my lips together, mentally counting the 3 tech companies I held controlling shares in, one of which had just declined Logan's pitch for funding last week. "I'll stop by. Don't be late like last time, you made me look bad." I hung up, took a deep breath, and opened my laptop. In 10 minutes, I finished reviewing the weekly report from Trident Financial, the finance firm under the holding group I manage. One line stood out. Hayes family. Rising debt. Poor credit. 2 new loans approved in the past month. Hayes family, that's my parents. They had mortgaged the house again. And I, through layers of shell companies, was the one who had acquired that loan. I didn't need threats, I just watched. One evening after work, I stopped by my mom's house, the red brick home in Newton's pricey neighborhood. Inside, the chandelier was still bright, the dinner table laid with imported cheese, Italian wine, and Logan sat with his legs up on the sofa, enthusiastically pitching to a group of potential investors about an app that lets cats pick their food using scent sensors. My mom looked down at me from the stairs, shaking her head. "Goodness, Mia, why'd you drive that old car here? Do you know what the neighbors must think?" "Probably that I'm not living off my mother," I replied. She went quiet, then turned away without a word. That was fine. I didn't need praise from someone who had spent a lifetime subtly cutting me down with words wrapped in velvet. And Logan, after that party, asked for another $80,000 to complete the beta version. My mother took out that amount, using a credit card with one of the highest interest rates on the market. I knew, because I'd just received the loan approval report. Addressed to the headquarters of M&L Credit Group, one of the finance companies I own through my 4th holding. They had no idea I was present in every link of their slow collapse. And I was still waiting. Patiently. Because in this game, the one who smiles last is the real winner. Winter came early in Newton, and colder than usual. Snow covered my mother's walkway, but the usual snow-clearing crew was gone. I noticed it when I slipped, climbing the icy front steps. The door opened, and my mother stood there with a forced smile, unable to hide the fatigue in her eyes. She no longer wore her signature pearl necklace, replacing it with a gold-plated chain now slightly tarnished. The Italian leather sofa in the living room had been swapped for a faux leather version, and the Persian rug at the entrance was gone. I quietly noted every detail. "You know," my mother sighed. "We've temporarily let the staff go. The pandemic, rising costs. Times are tough for everyone." I nodded, saying nothing. But I knew there was no new pandemic, only the creeping shadow of debt tightening around the Hayes family's neck. And they had no idea the noose had been tied by me. Logan still lived as if he were on top of the world. Just 3 weeks after my mother quietly sold her old engagement ring to pay the electric bill, Logan drove a brand new Tesla Model X to the bookstore where I worked. He wore a leather jacket, Balenciaga sunglasses, and strutted in like he was scouting a location for the empire he imagined himself building. "You're still here?" Logan smirked, glancing around with thinly veiled disdain. "This place smells like old books and stale coffee. Must be therapeutic, huh?" I gave a soft smile. "Very therapeutic. And you? That app? The one where cats order their own food, still going well?" Logan burst out laughing. "It's evolved. Now I'm partnering with an AI team to develop intelligent pet care software. Billion-dollar market. I'm negotiating with a major VC fund, might raise 4-5 million. I knew the major VC fund he was talking about was Larchmont Ventures, a firm that had just rejected Logan's pitch as unrealistic, financially unsound, and non-viable. I also knew because I was the controlling shareholder of Larchmont Ventures. A few weeks later my mom called me, whispering like she was afraid someone might overhear. "Mia, do you have a bit of cash? Just a few thousand. I need to pay the club membership. I mean, fix the water heater." I set the phone down, breathing slowly. I had just reviewed her credit report the day before. 4 credit cards overdue, and she had just received a notice that her privileges at Wellesley Hills Country Club had been revoked. I kept my tone light. "Mom, is the club really that important? Important enough to pretend it's a water heater repair?" Silence. Then a long, heavy sigh. I just don't want to lose face. My friends are there, they've been asking why I haven't shown up. I can't tell them I lost my card. I just need a few more months. Logan's launching his new platform soon. Everything will be fine." Nothing was going to be fine. I knew my parents had refinanced the house for the 3rd time in 2 years, the latest through a finance firm called Willow Fund LLC, a name that sounded unfamiliar but was actually a shell I created, with the entire loan under my control. I knew my father had begun quietly selling off stock in the company where he used to be a director, trying to cover up hidden debts. I knew my mother had sold her Chanel handbag collection, what she once proudly called irreplaceable class, to pay for the Tesla that Logan didn't even know was registered under her name. But the most painful part wasn't seeing them fall into hardship. It was that they still clung to the illusion, still poured money into the fantasy of Logan the genius, still saw me as the clueless poor girl who works at a bookstore. One Tuesday evening, I was working in the upstairs office when the doorbell rang insistently. I went down to open it. It was my mother. She was wearing a long coat, lips pale, hands trembling as she held a paper envelope. "Mia, I need your help, really. The house is about to be repossessed. I can't tell Logan, it would break him." I took the envelope. Inside was a copy of the foreclosure notice from Harborstone Financial, a subsidiary of Hawthorne Holdings, the name I created so they wouldn't know who was behind it. I looked at my mother, feeling empty inside. I thought Logan was about to launch a billion-dollar company. "He just needs more time. I just need your help this once." I nodded slowly. "All right, go home, let me see what I can do." She walked away, her steps heavy. I stood there for a long time, watching her figure fade into the snowy night. Back in the office, I opened my laptop. An email from my lawyer was already waiting in my inbox. Ready to send foreclosure notice as scheduled. I placed my hand on the mouse. For the first time in years, my heart pounded like it did when I was a child giving a class presentation. I didn't hate them, but I wouldn't protect them anymore. The truth would come out, and none of them were ready for it. 3 days later, my mother came to the bookstore. No warning, no text, no call. She burst through the door like she was running from something, eyes red, mascara streaked down her cheeks. I stood behind the counter, set the notebook down, trying to keep my voice calm. "What's going on, Mom?" She exhaled shakily, pulled a stack of house documents and another notice from Harborstone Financial out of her bag. The third one I'd seen this month. "Mia, they said if we don't pay in 5 more days, they'll take the house. I have nothing left, I need your help." I looked up at her. Her hair was messy, no longer pinned with her usual gold clip. The Louis Vuitton purse she always carried had been replaced with a worn canvas bag. She looked like the crumbling house itself, still trying to stand tall, but rotting from the inside. I held back the bitter ache rising in my chest, not out of pity, but resentment. All those years, she'd called me incompetent, average, lacking potential. And now she was begging the same daughter she once regretted having, saying she shouldn't have been born. I kept my face calm. "Mom, I work at this bookstore. I make $2,400 a month, after rent, utilities, food." I opened the drawer, pulled out a stack of small bills and counted them. "I have exactly $3,000 saved. Do you need all of it?" She stared at me, stunned. Then her expression turned to anger. "Mia, you can't be this selfish. This is your house too, you grew up there. If we lose it, what do you think will happen to us? Did you think about that when you refinanced the house a third time, to buy Logan that Rolex?" She froze. "He needs to maintain his image for investors. He has a future. He's this family's last hope." "And what am I, Mom?" I asked, still gently. "The good-for-nothing you call when you're desperate? The rest of the time, I'm just the useless bookstore clerk." She fell silent. After a while she started breathing heavily, then slammed her hand on the counter. "I raised you, I fed you, put you through school, and now you're counting dollars on me like a stranger?" I clenched my hands under the counter but smiled. "I paid for college myself, Mom. I remember clearly because you said, 'There's no money,' it all went to Logan. I worked 3 jobs for 4 straight years. Do you remember that?" She looked at me as if she couldn't understand the language I was speaking. I gently pushed the stack of documents back toward her. "I'm sorry, but I can't help. That money is all I have." That evening, my father called. No small talk, no asking how I was. He got straight to the point, his voice sharp and commanding, like every time he used to yell at me when I was a kid. "Mia, your mother said you refused to help. Do you have any idea this family is on the brink?" I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window. Chicago at night glittered outside. My office was on the 39th floor, where every signed contract could shift the fate of an entire bloodline. "I know, but I don't have much to help with either. Did you forget? I just work at a bookstore." "Cut that tone right now," he barked. "This isn't the time for jokes. You're a daughter of this family. You can't let your parents lose everything like this." I stayed silent for a moment, then asked, "What about Logan? Why don't you ask him?" "He's prepping for a new round of funding. He needs to keep up appearances." "Sweetheart, you don't understand. This world is harsh, especially for young men. Logan has to maintain his image." I let out a soft, steel-egged laugh. "And women? They don't need to maintain anything?" My father didn't answer. A minute later his voice dropped, heavy. "If you won't help, then from now on, you're no longer my daughter." I sat still, quietly ended the call. Not a single tear. The next day, I received a report from my private attorney. All the Hayes family's credit card debt, mortgages and business loans had officially been acquired by Mia Whitmore Holdings, the shell company I had created. From this day forward, every decision regarding the house, the assets, the credit cards, and even Logan's outstanding student loans were under my control. I texted my lawyer. Begin the process. Send payment demand notice. 10-day deadline. I returned to the bookstore, made myself a cup of mint tea. There weren't many customers. The soft light spilled across the dusty windows. A strange, calm silence filled the air. I sat there, my hand resting gently on a stack of old ledgers, and smiled. They thought I had nothing, and I let them believe that for the past 3 years. But not anymore. The game had begun, and I was the one holding the deck. That morning was cold and gray, the kind of bleakness only found on a day of reckoning. I parked the sleek black Mercedes outside the Suffolk County Courthouse wearing a light brown trench coat, my hair in a neat bun, makeup subtle but deliberate. No one could recognize poor bookstore girl Mia, in the figure seated silently behind the wheel. I arrived 20 minutes early, not to prepare the documents, everything had been ready for days, but to observe. To witness the exact moment the Hayes family would officially fall out of their perfect facade. At exactly 8:41 a.m., Logan's scratched silver Tesla rolled into the parking lot. My parents stepped out, straightening their coats, trying to keep composed faces, though my mother's eyes were bloodshot, and my father walked as if the whole world weighed on his back. Logan still wore sunglasses, dragging a file case behind him without so much as glancing at our parents. They didn't know I was there. To them, I was still just a shadow behind the bookstore counter, far from any real power play. Courtroom 6 was packed, partly media because the name Hayes Enterprises had once been a respected brand in northeastern real estate, and partly finance people curious to see who the main creditor was, the one bringing this family to ruin in just 3 years. Judge Wanda Ellison, known for her no-nonsense stance on high society bankruptcies, entered. She struck the gavel. Civil bankruptcy hearing number 4928, defendants, the Hayes family. She glanced at the file, then looked up. Primary creditor, please confirm your presence. I stood up. A murmur spread through the courtroom like a cold wind. My father whipped around, my mother's mouth fell open, and Logan dropped the phone he was holding. "I'm Mia Whitmore," I said clearly, "the legal representative of Whitmore Holdings, the company that currently owns all of the defendants' outstanding debts, with a total estimated value of $12,700,000. "No way," my mother whispered, her face pale. "Mia, what is this?" my father stammered. "Don't you work at a bookstore?" I turned to them, calm to the point of being unsettling. "I still do. I love reading, but that's not all I am." Judge Ellison nodded. "Please continue, Ms. Whitmore." I opened my briefcase, pulled out the carefully prepared documents and placed them on the table. Over the past 3 years, the defendants have refinanced their house 3 times, taken out 6 large consumer loans from 5 different financial institutions, and accumulated numerous overlapping credit card debts. All current lending entities have been acquired by Whitmore Holdings, and I am the legal representative. "Mia, how could you do this to your own family?" My mother sobbed. "You're my daughter. You said I wasn't your daughter anymore when I refused to give you my last $3,000 in savings. Do you remember that?" The entire room fell silent. I continued. "However, I didn't come here to destroy anyone. I came to offer an opportunity." I placed another folder on the table, sliding it toward the family's lawyer. "This is a debt restructuring proposal. If accepted, all debts will be retained, without further collection, under 3 mandatory conditions." Judge Ellison nodded for me to proceed. I glanced at Logan, then my parents. Condition 1. Logan Hayes will have all access to family credit accounts revoked. He must find a job. No startups, no fundraising, no life-changing ideas. His first job has already been arranged. Sales associate at Pet King Pet Store in Roxbury. Hourly wage, $15. "What?" Logan shot up, furious. "You can't force me to take some garbage job like that. I'm a founder, "You're a burden," I cut in coldly. and it's time you learned the value of a real hour of labor." The judge banged her gavel. "Please continue, Miss Whitmore." I nodded. Condition 2. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes must enroll in a mandatory 12-month financial counseling program with weekly spending reports, and may not exceed a personal budget of $2,500 per month. My father clenched his jaw, my mother continued to sob. "The final condition," I said slowly. "The family must sell the Newton mansion within 45 days. I've already purchased a smaller house, located in a quiet area of Worcester. 3 bedrooms, a loft, a backyard with a plum tree. Enough to live, not to show off." The air in the courtroom thickened. Judge Ellison flipped through the documents. "This is the most generous restructuring offer I've ever seen. Counsel for the defendants, does your client agree?" The lawyer whispered something to my father. After a moment, he nodded, his face like he had just swallowed ice. "We accept." I closed the folder, stood up and smiled. Not out of victory, but because the truth had finally come to light. As I stepped out of the courtroom, I heard footsteps rushing behind me. "Mia, why?" my mother gasped, no longer angry, only broken. I turned around, eyes steady. "Because you need to understand, I'm not the foolish little girl from the bookstore. I'm the last person you should have underestimated." An hour after the hearing ended, I stood on the front steps of the Suffolk County Courthouse. The wind whipped through my trench coat like it was tearing the final page from a long chapter. Logan sat slumped on a bench near the parking lot, his face drained of color. My mother, her perfectly groomed hair now in disarray, clutched a canvas bag like it was the last thing she had left. My father said nothing, staring at the ground, his forehead damp with sweat. No one dared come near me, no one asked anything, not a single word of reproach. They had no choice left. Pride was now a luxury they could no longer afford. 3 days later, I received a confirmation email from the car dealership. Logan's pearl white Porsche Taycan had been repossessed, and per my instructions, a 2015 ash gray Toyota Corolla had been delivered to the new address in Worcester. No sunroof, no heated seats, no premium sound system. But enough to get to work, if he was actually willing to go. Logan's message came in at 2:14 a.m., just one line. "You've ruined my life." I didn't reply, because he needed to learn that his life wasn't ruined by me, but by the privileges he never deserved in the first place. The mansion in Newton was listed for 20% below market value. I was the buyer, through a small branch of Whitmore Holdings. This time, no corporate signage, no press coverage, just an ordinary real estate transaction. I didn't need anyone to know. I only needed them to know. My mother called one last time before the move. "Mia, I just want to ask, why Worcester?" Her voice was hoarse, stripped of bitterness, with no trace of threat. I smiled softly through the phone. "Because it's quiet, and affordable. But, I don't belong in a place like that. I used to think the same about myself when you said I wasn't classy enough to sit at the Blackwell family table." Silence stretched. Then she said something I never thought I'd hear from her. "I'm sorry." I didn't know if it was sincere or simply born of desperation, but I didn't need to find out. I just replied quietly. "I hope that for the first time in your life you live in reality, no illusions, no lies." The following week, I attended a high-end fashion exhibition in New York, not to shop, but to meet the designer behind the brand Elysian, the label that had produced the frilly green dress my mother forced me to wear to Logan's honor party last year. At the time, she had said, "You have to wear this, it makes you look expensive. At least it'll make people think you have some value." I didn't argue. I endured the judgmental looks, the whispers behind my back, and the feeling of being shackled in lace and gemstones. But today was different. I shook hands with the designer, handed him the acquisition folder. Whitmore Holdings had just officially acquired the entire Elysian brand, and the first thing I did was issue an internal notice to discontinue the Glimmergrace line. The very green dress model. After the meeting, I called my mother. She picked up on the 5th ring. That green dress, I began. That design is gone. Permanently. What? I bought the company. And I've eliminated the model you once made me wear. It's ugly. In every sense of the word. Mia, did you do this to get back at me? No. I did it to end an era. One where I had to endure humiliation in the name of family love. She went silent. I hung up, not needing a response. Over the next 3 months, I received regular reports from the financial oversight firm managing the Hayes family. Logan lasted 2 weeks at his job before quitting, citing a toxic work environment. My father attempted to apply for an emergency loan from another bank but was denied because Whitmore Holdings had already flagged his credit as high risk. My mother unexpectedly became a gardener. For the first time in her life, she pulled weeds with her own hands instead of pressing a button to call the staff. I didn't intervene anymore. I had done my part, the rest was their choice. One Saturday afternoon, I returned to the bookstore. Not as the employee but as the actual owner. I placed the old photo frame of me and Grandma Margaret in the center of the table, behind it a white curtain gently swaying. I sat down, held a cup of tea and closed my eyes. No more anger. No more pain. Just a quiet sense of peace, slowly spreading in my chest. My grandmother once said, "True strength doesn't lie in revenge. It lies in knowing when to let go." Today, I fully understood that. 3 months after the trial, spring began to touch Boston. The first flowers bloomed along Commonwealth Avenue, but the real change, the slow and silent shift, was not in the parks or sidewalks, but deep inside a small house in the suburbs of Worcester. I sat in my high-rise office, 39th floor of the Whitmore Executive Tower, looking at a screen filled with data from the Financial Oversight Department. The March report on the Hayes family had arrived, and for the first time, I paused at every line. Financial status, stable. Weekly spending, under the regulated threshold. I attended all 12 financial counseling sessions at the Franklin Center. I didn't believe it right away. I had to call to confirm with the program manager. She gave a small smile. Mrs. Hayes is the first to arrive every morning, always sits in the front row, takes detailed notes. And Mr. Hayes, he doesn't say much, but always brings a small ledger, records every single expense. They're genuinely serious. I sat still for a moment. And Logan? According to the HR report from Pet King Roxbury, he had worked for 7 consecutive weeks without missing a shift. For the first time in his life, he was living off his own wages. Logan is very quiet now, the store manager wrote in an email. He seems to still be adjusting, but he doesn't complain, he does his job, on time. Gone was the arrogant heir who once stepped out of a Porsche talking about AI and billion-dollar visions. Maybe, for the first time in his life, Logan was really living. That afternoon, I didn't attend the executive board meeting like usual. I stayed in my office and asked Sarah, my personal assistant, to bring in a wooden box. The box was small, old, with a bronze lock that had darkened over time. I opened it and took out a faded photo. Grandma Margaret and me, standing in front of the bookstore when I was 14. She was smiling, her hand on my shoulder, eyes saying, "You'll be stronger than I ever was." I had kept that photo for 11 years. Carried it through 3 apartments, 2 states, and dozens of moments when I wanted to throw it away. But I never dared to. Today, I didn't just look at the photo. I saw myself in it. I remembered the early days, when she taught me how to keep expense records with a fountain pen. I remembered how she patiently explained what stocks were using corn kernels and a tin can. I remembered the winter night she held me while my mother scolded me for learning useless things, and said something I would never forget. "Mia, don't be afraid when people look down on you. They only do that because they don't know how easily you could make the whole world bow someday." I placed the photo on the desk, next to my laptop and the folder. Gently, without tears, but with a storm of emotions inside. That weekend, I went to Worcester. I didn't announce it. I parked 5 houses away from my mother's, then walked. The small house, painted white, had the plum tree in the front yard just as I'd arranged. No big gate, no statues, stone fountains, or chandeliers. Just a home. A real home. I saw my father cleaning the windows. No longer a manager, no tie. Just an older man bending down to live a life without illusions. My mother was mowing the lawn, hair tied neatly, wearing rubber gloves. I didn't walk up, I just stood from afar for a few minutes. Long enough to see they were trying. That night, back in Boston, I wrote a line in my digital journal, a habit I'd kept since my grandmother passed. The greatest strength doesn't lie in wealth, but in how we choose the moment to reveal it. She was right. I didn't need to make them suffer. I just needed to let the truth do its job. I didn't retaliate, I offered an opportunity. Whether they chose to start over or keep falling was up to them. The next day I went to Maple Pages, the old bookstore I had kept untouched. I never renovated it too much, never hung a corporate-owned sign. It was where I grew up. A living memory. Sarah texted me, "Are you sure you want to keep this store? It doesn't make a profit." I replied, "I don't need it to be profitable. I need it to remind me where I started." In the afternoon, a young customer, around 15 years old, came in looking for books on investing. He asked, "Do you think an average person can become wealthy?" I smiled, bent down, and handed him The Millionaire Next Door. Not only can they should. The boy smiled, paid with a few crumpled bills, then walked away, unaware he had just received advice from one of the wealthiest and most discreet female CEOs in the state of Massachusetts. I watched him leave, quietly thinking to myself, let them think you have nothing. When the time comes, show them you have everything. 5 years later, I stood in the grand hall of the Harvard Business School, where crystal lights from the ceiling reflected off polished wooden floors, creating an atmosphere both solemn and quiet. In my hand was a microphone, and in front of me were hundreds of students. Young faces full of hope, eager to hear the journey of the anonymous woman of Boston's financial world. I began with a line Grandma Margaret once whispered to me before I left Vermont at 18. "When you're underestimated, you don't need to argue, just prove it with results." The hall went silent. I talked about the days working at an old bookstore, about hiding a multi-million-dollar fortune, just to see who loved me for real, and who only loved the wallet I carried. I spoke of family, not with resentment, but with the calm of someone who had walked through pain and arrived at the chapter called growth. I shared how I took control of all their debts, but instead of crushing them, I gave them a second chance. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Forgiveness means choosing not to let that pain imprison your future. After the talk, a young female student approached me shyly. She said her mother once called her a failure for not studying law like she wanted. That she felt invisible in her own family. I looked at her, short hair, eyes still red with emotion, and I saw my younger self. I took her hand. "You're not invisible. You're just waiting for your moment to shine, and when it comes, don't apologize for shining too brightly." My parents' house in Worcester is different now. Not luxurious, not grand, but comfortable and warm. I still visit every few weeks. Not out of obligation, but because I choose to. My mother now volunteers at the local church, and my father, he unexpectedly found joy in growing organic vegetables, and always sends me bundles of lettuce with a scribbled note. Homegrown, truly organic. Logan works for a nonprofit organization that supports startup initiatives for underprivileged youth. He once said to me one evening in our mother's kitchen, "I used to think money was power, but it turns out it's just a tool. The one holding it is what matters." I just nodded, saying nothing. Because I knew he had finally understood something it took me nearly a lifetime to learn. Maple Pages remains open every day, now with a small cafe in the back left corner and a bookshelf labeled, "Free, if you need it more than I do." I no longer work there directly, but I still come in every week, sit in my old corner, and read a random book. to remember the journey I'd taken. On the center wall, I've hung a photo of me and Grandma Margaret, next to a small plaque that reads, "True strength doesn't lie in wealth, but in how we choose to reveal our dignity." Now, I no longer live in two worlds. I don't have to hide and I don't need to flaunt. I am Mia Whitmore, the woman once deemed unremarkable, once overlooked by her own family, once drowned in the false glow of someone else's spotlight. And now, I am the keeper of my own light. Sometimes late at night, when the city is quiet and only a few skyscraper lights flicker in the dark, I sit on the balcony of my apartment, sip a cup of mint tea, and whisper a silent thank you to the past. Thank you for not believing in me. Thank you for underestimating me. Because of that, I learned to believe in myself, without anyone's permission. And if you, the one reading this, have ever been told you're not enough, remember this. Your silence today may be the loudest echo of tomorrow. Be patient. Your moment will come. Mia's story is not just a journey to reclaim justice from an unfair family. It's a powerful testament that a person's value doesn't lie in recognition from others, but in how they choose to face pain and grow from it. In real life, many have been underestimated or dismissed just because they didn't fit expectations or didn't show off. But like Mia, when we stay true to ourselves, learn to wait, and live by our real worth, the moment to shine will come, and we won't need to ask for permission. What do you think of Mia's journey and her family's transformation? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to follow the channel to explore more heartfelt stories about life, family, and true human value.